Alright, so this video is essentially meant to replace the previous tutorial on making creature replacements. The previous one had some information that I don't think was 100% accurate. I've learned some things since then, some new tricks. So what I'm going to do today is show how I replaced Demi Phoenix with Heidelin, just like I did in that video. And to start, I'll go over what I went over in that video so that there's no gaps in the information. So I have to start with the file paths. The way I found these file paths was using the Data Explorer. Specifically, the ones for like creature animations, their model, their textures, all that kind of, their skeleton files, that's all found in Index 4. So you can find things for humans in here as well, demi-humans, but right now I'm going to focus on monsters. Demi-humans and humans are a little bit more complicated, but monsters are kind of the most common ones that people are going to want to use, that you're going to want to use. So I'm going to cover that. The other thing you can also find in the Data Explorer is in Index 7. Give that a moment to load. So in here you will find this file, sound voice VO _ line. These are voiceover lines. So in order to give Heidelin a voice, this is where I pulled from. There's no way, it's not numbered the same as monster numbers are, so it is a case of a lot of plugging and testing in the visual effects editor, where you can plug in sound effects to test and see, okay, well, what does the sound effect sound like? So that's how I found Heidelin's voiceover lines. So that covers the the Data Explorer, so I don't need that now. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to replace Demi Phoenix with Heidelin. Heidelin's monster number is M0714. So I've already got this notepad document set up, which this document will be available for download. I have several more resources now that I'm putting together or slowly working on creating databases for, that will be available through Google Drive. So you won't have to search for all this yourself. But what I've got here, so I'm going to take the model number here, which is the .mdl, as you can see here, and I'm going to replace Demi Phoenix with it. So I use copy model file, which is raw operations, or raw file operations. So copy from Heidelin to Demi Phoenix's model file. So I'll give that a moment, and I'll choose a variant, because it doesn't update right away, so I'll go back. Alright, so Heidelin's textures have been copied over. I'll go look at the model. Give it some time. It can take a moment, especially when you're working on a laptop like I am. So just be patient. Yeah, sometimes it'll act like it's gonna not work or it's gonna go unresponsive. Just give it time. It will respond. Alright, so she's loaded in. And what you see down here, like, she has these crystals by her feet. A lot of creatures will come with weapons, various objects that are a part of their model. They will animate with their model, but I don't want this crystal. to show up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to export it by FBX, which I've already done. And now I'm going to go ahead and import her. Under mounts, yeah, I've got a lot listed here that I've extracted. 710.714, import. Alright, so here she is in Blender, and there are her little crystals by her feet. So I just want to click, delete, click, delete, click, delete. Alright, now they're all gone. So once I've done that, I will export it back out by FBX. And when I usually export again, I like to export into the creature that into the folder for the creature I'm replacing. So one of the things I usually turn off is under armature. I usually turn off add leaf bones because I don't, if I'm exporting a creature repeatedly, I don't want more and more bones appearing on top. I want the original creature's bones. I don't know if it necessarily affects the creature's animations. I'd rather not risk it, but I'm going to go ahead and turn that off anyways. So here I have one that I've already saved. I'm just going to overwrite it. Alright, so I'm going to come back here, import. Now, since she is the same model, just minus some crystals, I don't need to use the editor. If she was a different model or I was doing something kind of tricky, I might need to use the editor, but that's a different beast in and of itself. So I'm going to go here, add in no crystals, import. Once again, give it some time. It'll take a few moments. Okay, so she has loaded in, and as you can see, she no longer has the crystals at her feet. So I'm done, right? Well, no. What I need to do now is give her a skeleton. Because if I loaded her in right now, the animations and skeleton files of Demi Phoenix would still be in place. She would turn into model soup, pretty much. So I'm going to copy over her skeleton files. Some creatures have only 2 of these files. Usually it's the EID and SKLB files. Some creatures have all 3. If they have all 3, use all 3. But if they only have 2, that's usually fine as well. So, third one here. There. Alright, so the skeleton files have been copied over, but that's not enough. What I'm going to need next is the monster.pap files. Now, before what I used to do is I used to just directly copy one monster.pap file over the other. Well, what I do now is I extract this file. So I use raw file extract, or raw file operations, extract raw file, paste it in a file path, extract the file. So I'm going to save it under idle, and I've already saved it once before, but let's overwrite it. So now that I have it extracted, I'm going to come here and I'm going to open it. And this is hexed.it. It's free, online based hex editor, really simple to use. And I've actually already opened her file now, or her monster.pap file. Now the reason why I opened it and I want to look into it is because I want to make sure she doesn't have any dead pose animations on it. Dead pose, or I like to call them death throws, because in a lot of cases it looks like they're in pain when they're dying, because that's what it handles. Is dead pose handles a death animation. But as you can see, Heidelin doesn't have one. Let's open up a creature that I know does. One that was kind of comical was Ixion. So I've already got Ixion pulled up here. I'm going to open up monster.pap. Alright, so he has dead pose here. He also has DED. I don't know for sure if DED is also something to do with death. I usually assume it does. So what I usually do is I just put zeros where it says DED. I don't replace CBBM or the underscore. I just use zeros on DED. And then I do the same thing for dead pose. So you can think of CBBM underscore as indicating like a true name of an animation. Where you see things like MON underscore SP012, that's not really what I call its true name. That's this code right here. So when I save this here, if I save it as, and let's go back to Ixion. This is just as an example. So if I wanted to make it Ifrits, I usually save it as monster ifrit.pap. So this would mean that when I put it on Ixion, whenever Ixion is done with its animations, or it's no longer needed on the field, it's just going to pixelate out. It's not going to go into death throes. I find that preferable to like death animations, just because they can be really dramatic and really difficult to watch for a creature you summoned and you think of as yours. So I always try to remove them. I don't know if there's a way to replace them yet. I'm kind of looking into that, but fading out is still a preferable option in my opinion. So, but as you can see, Heidelin doesn't have a dead pose animation, so she's fine. So I can, on her, just directly copy one from the other, which I'm not going to do. I'm going to go ahead and import the one I exported, which essentially does the same thing. So import Heidelin already, and monster.pap. So what I now have here is a monster, or is a Demi Phoenix replacement that when I summon it, it will idle and move. But that's it. Any attack animations, its special pop animations, those will go haywire, pretty much. So I need to give Phoenix abilities. Now Demi Phoenix is a special creature in that it uses an ability right when it appears. Now the new PvP Bahamut does something similarly, does an ability right away, but the PvE version of Bahamut needs a special pop. So to make a special pop, which I'll show you here, this is the file path for it. I'm going to use an ability. Let's go ahead and use 001. This, I've already pulled up Heidelin's MON underscore SP001. To get this file, you just use an animation file path here, and you just extract it, just like you did with the monster.pap. And you know what, let's just go ahead and show extracting it. So there's an extraction. There we go. Now it's extracted. I open it, go to Heidelin, monster underscore SP001.pap. See? Same file. Everything is exactly the same. So I don't need that. So in order to turn an ability animation into a special pop animation, it was actually a lot simpler than I was making it. So you've got CBBM here, underscore SP01. This is, you can think of this as the ability's true name. What I'm going to do is turn it into a file path that is recognized as a special pop. and that is SP_POP. If you pull the special pop for Demi Phoenix, which I think I may have already pulled before. Summons, no. Okay, here's Garuda. No. Never mind, I guess I haven't pulled it before. Okay, here's one. So, underscore SP, or SP_pop. That's for every creature. Every special pop on any creature pretty much uses SP_POP. So, am I done? No. Because ability and special pop animations have two locations where their name is located, yeah. So SP_POP at the top, and then one at the bottom. So if I were to save this now and load it into text tools, it wouldn't work. It just wouldn't function. So I need to do the same thing down here. Now every animation, pretty much every file I've seen, ends in one of these blanks. Oh, not that one. Yes, like a blank like this. 0, 0. So I always add 0, 0 to the end. You can do that by just clicking over here on the left-hand side, right there where the plus sign was, and just typing 0, 0. So that adds that blank at the end, and then I'd save it as something like special pop 01.pap. That's usually what I use, or I use SP01. It's really whatever you can keep track of. But for me, this works because this means that I've turned ability 01 into a special pop. So save it, yeah. Alright, so I would come back here, use this file path to import raw file, special pop 01.pap. Now, because Phoenix does an ability like right away after being summoned, that special pop is likely not going to be noticeable anyways. So there's no harm in disabling it or making it, not function at all, So to do that, you can actually take an ability animation that hasn't been renamed, like if I just directly copied from ability 001 to Phoenix's special pop, which I'm going to go ahead and do. Whoops. Raw file copy, 1 to special pop for Phoenix. So now what I've done is I've just canceled that special pop from happening. It doesn't technically cancel it. It's not like I'm coding it to cancel, but it's not gonna play because that special pop file is not labeled _SP_POP. So I've just stopped that from playing. But I do need to do something for ability 1 for Phoenix, or Everlasting Flight, which is Phoenix's first ability. So to do that, I'm going to use Heidelin's 01, which I've already got pulled up here, with her 12 animation, SP12. So how does that exactly work? Well, that all comes down to the name. TMB files are essentially a list of visual effects. They do handle other aspects of an ability. I think they have some targeting aspects as well. I know in the case of Shiva with her stomp animation I did, some TMB files would cause her to just do it in place, whereas other ones actually she would go to the target, which was preferable. So it is sometimes a case of having to test your TMB file. But in order to make this function with ability 12, I can go one of two routes. I can either rename SP12 to SP01, which is this CBBM label at the very bottom, and I do that for both the top and the bottom names, or I can rename the TMB file to SP12, which I find preferable personally. It's only one location I'm doing it. I'm usually always doing something with animation files to rename them to special pop files, so this just saves me from having to rename a bunch of animation files. It pretty much allows me to do only the TMB files and work from there. So now, once I save this, I'm going to save it under viable, and I like to rename it 01-12 to indicate that this is TMB01, but renamed to 12. So I save that. So what would happen is if I loaded these two files into text tools, the visual effects for Heidelin's ability 1 would play alongside the animations for her 12th ability. But I don't want the visual effects for ability 1 to play alongside her 12th ability. But I do want the TMB file 01 to play alongside the animation file for her 12th animation ability. So how do I remove these visual effects without breaking the game or anything? Well, that's where the summons come in. So what I've done here is I have pulled all the summons ability TMB files, and I've transcribed them into this file, which will be available for you to use as well. And these are all, most of them at least, are unique to the summons themselves, the summoner's creatures. So in the case of Demi Bahamut, this AVFX file is not used by Bahamut. In fact, it's not used by any other creature that I know of in the game besides Demi Bahamut. And the same for Demi Phoenix. So if I'm replacing Demi Phoenix anyways, I can go ahead and use Demi Phoenix's AVFX files to essentially give me a blank slate, a free-for-all visual effect file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take this over here, like that, and go back to my editor. And let me resize this a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to change this AVFX file path for this one. Not really difficult. All I'm going to do is type the new file path. 7106 SP _ 01C0H .avfx. Okay, as you can see, the file path I've replaced is longer than the one I'm replacing it with. This isn't an issue. If the one I was replacing it with was longer, that would be an issue, but because it's shorter, all I'm going to do is use, like I did at the bottom for the other file, is 00. And that bridges the blanks. Pretty much, I don't want any file, or I don't want an AVFX file that I'm using or replacing to shift other files down. And I also don't want them to shift up. I want them to leave everything essentially in the same place. So now what this does is I can save this, and when I load it back into Text Tools and I loaded up the game and I used these files that the 12th animation and TMB 01-12, this file, this AVFX file, will play alongside Heidelin's animation 12. That means Demi Phoenix's Everlasting Flight visual effect would play alongside Heidelin's 12 animation. Now I would use a different, I'd actually, let me open up another AVFX file, or TMB file from Heidelin here. I personally like one because, or no, not one, let me try a different one. Two. Go for, okay, 6. 6 will work. So I like using ones that have one AVFX file on them. This makes life a lot easier. I'm not having to deal with timing between two different AVFX files or the TMB files timing as much. So I'm going to go ahead and do it on this one. So 7106, 7106, SP_01C0. Whoops. Oh, don't do that. Don't cause anything to shift. 0h.avfx. And then 000000. Alright. So now this is on TMB that is named 06. I want it to be 12. So I'm going to relabel it 12. I'm going to save it. I'm going to do 06-12. Alright, so 06-12 with Demi Phoenix's Everlasting Flight AVFX file and visual effects, pretty much, will now play next to Heidelin's 12 animation. With me so far? But there's another thing on TMB files that can be kind of problematic sometimes. And that's these files right here. Sound. I don't want the sound for 06 to play alongside Demi Phoenix. So what I usually do, just like I did with Dead Pose, is I add 00 to where SE was. This cancels the sound from playing entirely. I've not run into any stability issues with that. Primarily the stability issues that I have seen or that I have experienced have always dealt with things shifting in the code. But this should not cause any stability issues. So I'm going to save it, and I'm going to save it again in 06-12. Now I'm going to import them onto Phoenix. So 7106, import raw file. I'm going to choose the one I made, 6-12. And then do the same thing for this animation. Go get animation 12. MON012.pap. Alright, so what I now have is a Heidelin Demi Phoenix replacement that when I summon her will do ability or her animation for animation 12, and the visual effects TMB file of 06, but with the AVFX file of Phoenix's Everlasting Flight. Now, what I would normally do after this is I would go in and I would go into the visual effects editor and I would edit Demi Phoenix's Everlasting Flight AVFX. So I would edit this file path. And that will then affect my Heidelin summon. The reason I use, or I've been doing this, is because this gives me a pretty much complete freedom to do whatever I want visual effects wise for a creature, and it will not affect the fight for Heidelin. So even though I'm using Heidelin's TMB file, Heidelin's PAP file, the visual effects here that that those files are now referencing are unique to Demi Phoenix. So I can go do whatever I want to that. I can make it a heal. I can make it Medica 2, which is actually what I kind of did, along with some other visual effects. So that's how I've kind of gotten complete freedom to do whatever I want creature-wise and not have it cause issues with fights. So now you've got a creature that summons, idles, appears fine with a special pop, or if you don't need it, in the case of Demi Phoenix, you don't need it, you just replace it with something to cancel the special pop, and you've got a Everlasting Flight. You do something similar that I did with 0-1 for Phoenix's auto attack, which is 0-2, and then Phoenix's alt, which is 0-3, so that you can have complete freedom to edit the attacks, the ultimate, and everything like that. So you can stop there if you want, and that's a great summon. A lot of creatures have voiceover lines, though. Most don't. The vast majority of creatures and creature edits you'll probably do won't have voiceover lines, but some do, and in the case of Heidelin, she does, and they are some of the most iconic lines in the game. They're very, very, fun to hear. So what I've done is I've started pulling voiceover lines as well. Again, all these resources are going to be available to you. I try to keep them as accurate as I can. If there's ever any issues, just let me know on Discord. I'm always happy to receive messages and hear from people. If you just want to say hi, that's great. But anyways, I'm digressing. So with these file paths, what you'll do is you'll take this and you'll inject it into the VFX editor. Now I'm not going to go into that. I'm not going to go into VFX editing right now, especially since with all this stuff going on about people getting targeted for bans and everything, I don't want to have to edit a video to try to remove names and all that other stuff. So I'm not going to log into the game to show the summon or show what I've done here. But this, essentially you can use the visual effect editor to then inject voiceover lines onto abilities, like I did with the ultimate I did for Heidelin as Demi Phoenix. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I think that's about everything. As you can see, I've been starting on a few other things like sound effects from abilities. I usually try to do sound effects of monsters as well as I use a monster, or as I use a creature to make a replacement. I usually try, whenever I'm pulling the TMB files, I'll try to add them in here as well. But yeah, I'd love to see what other people come up with, other creatures you make. I really hope to see more like this. Learning hex code, or learning to edit the hex code, has been such a huge improvement to summon creation and just how well they look. learning how to use the AVFX files for the summons, the summoners creatures, so that I can, get almost absolute freedom for making abilities look how I want them to look, has just taken it to the next level. The voiceover stuff was a recent thing I learned. I saw Izumi do it and I thought it was really cool, so I wanted to learn. I, you know, searched through the index files to try to find that. But yeah, so just have fun with it. Send me a message if you ever have any questions or anything, or you find something wrong, or if you see if one of these files that I'm using is affecting anything else in the game. I try to take as much precaution as I can with these, and I try to limit which ones I use on which creatures by doing this. So every Bahamut replacement I use, I'll always try to use either this for the file that has 13 characters, or this for a file that has 14 characters, so that my Bahamuts can be interchangeable. That's a very important aspect for it to me. There are some file lengths that are 12 characters long, in which case the only summons that I've found for summoner or any summoned creature is on the Rook and Bishop auto turrets. Weirdly enough, they are 12 letters long, so they're fairly limited as well. Anything I've gotten red, I know are used by other creatures in the game, so I try to avoid those. I do not use them. Anything in blue is a PvP ability. So I try to keep track of it and keep track of what I put on which creature. So every Ifrit I do that needs a 12-letter long one is going to use this one. Same with Titan and Gruta. Titan and Gruta. This is the reason why I try to find TMB files that only have one AVFX file on them, because that makes this easier to do, more viable. But yeah, that's everything I've learned since I first started doing this. I hope this helps other people create creatures of their own. And if you have any questions or just want to say hi, just send me a message on Discord.